Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our beauty and personal care webinar. We're really excited to have this conversation with Sarah, Ming, Lisa, and Keith. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to be your MC, Mike. I'm the community manager here at manufactured.com. A little bit about us before we kick things off. Manufactured helps brands source, manufacture, finance, and manage inventory all from one single dashboard. We work with 700 plus vetted vendors across 25 countries and 20 consumer categories. Beauty and personal care is one of the categories that we serve. We make the manufacturing and inventory financing process a breeze for consumer brands. And our goal is to reduce COGs while increasing inventory amounts without sacrificing quality. We provide free quotes, and if you might be interested in only the inventory financing side, you do not need to use your vendor network in order. You don't need to use our vendor network in order to work with us. We can onboard your manufacturers onto our platform as well as assist you with orchestrating your supply chain. So with all that being said, if you're a consumer brand operator, VC, or service provider, and would be interested in learning more about our inventory financing product and or help on the manufacturing side, please let us know in this poll. We'll just give it a few seconds here. If you might be interested in learning more about manufactured, if you can please respond, that'd be great. Perfect. On to today's webinar. Really excited to be joined by Sarah, Ming, Lisa, and Keith. Sarah, let's start with you. Give us a brief introduction about Cult Capital.
Will do. Yeah. So my name is Sarah Woelfel. Thanks again, Mike, for hosting this webinar today and having me on the show. I am co-founder and partner at Cult Capital. We're about 9 years old. We've been investing in consumer product companies for 9 years. We provide support and capital to early stage businesses in the consumer space, specifically consumer product companies. So we're focused on the subcategories of food, beverage, beauty, personal care, fashion, apparel, accessories. Beauty is one of our key categories, so we do spend about 50% of our time in that space. And we're typically making initial investments in companies when they are between 2 to 10 million of revenue and seeking a Series A or a Series B raise. And then we work side by side with founders and their management teams to help them scale. Really, our sweet spot is helping them scale from, call it that, 2 to 10 million of revenue to 100 million plus of revenue. So that is, in a nutshell, what we do. For reference, some of the rounds that we've led for beauty brands in the space are for brands like Supergoop in the sun care space, Lawless Beauty in the clean cosmetic space, and Actinaker in the clean hair care space. So definitely love the beauty space and have some breadth of experience in earlier stage beauty brands.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Ming, how about you? Do you mind sharing us a bit about Proven?
Happy to. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mike, for having me on this chat today. I'm Ming Zhao, the co-founder and co-CEO of Proven Skincare. We use award-winning and patented technology to create personalized skincare products that are based on 47 factors about an individual, from your style of life to your skin concerns to your environmental factors where you live. And what's truly unique is that not only do we look at those factors from when you first begin Proven, but as people's lives change and evolve, we will update our understanding of what your factors are to you so that the products are updated like software. So as people get pregnant or they enter menopause, or a man might change the way they shave their face, we take or just the seasons change, from a winter to a summer to a fall, our products evolve with our customers, which is what led to the industry leading retention rates that we have. Proven was launched in 2019, and we've experienced tremendous growth since then. And in terms of our founding journey, we came out of the Y Combinator Accelerator program, as well as Stanford StartX. In fact, Proven was founded by myself and my co-founder, whose name is Dr. Amy Yuan, who is a computational physicist from Stanford. So that was our unique insight in the data, where we first built the largest database in all of beauty, which combined more than 28 million consumer testimonials and reviews and data points, together with more than 4,000 scientific papers, basically all the scientific papers there are around skincare and beauty. And we use that and use machine learning and neural networks to understand what people are saying that worked and what didn't. And from that, we created what we call the Skin Genome Project. And we're also working on our beauty GPT based off of that. As more of an internal fun project. But from that is what allowed us to create personalized products. And now we have 2 patents across the personalization category, really locking down this category, and have also expanded into personalized fragrance.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ming, for that. Lisa, if you don't mind telling us a bit about Experiment.
Sure. So Experiment is a Gen Z science-backed skincare brand up to kind of the highest level. We make what we call futuristic skin essentials for the chemistry-curious consumer. All of our products are clinically proven, thoughtfully sustainable, ridiculously fun. We feel really strongly that kind of the future of science in beauty is not the kind of black and white dropper bottle lab coat aesthetics we see from most clinical brands today. It's really one that's more fun, colorful, vibrant, and culturally relevant to kind of a new generation of consumers, Gen Z. Basically, beauty's most educated consumer, having grown up on the internet and learning about beauty from like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. They are like very, very sophisticated skincare and beauty consumers, and are requiring more from brands than just kind of one note kind of efficacy stories. They want brands that can do kind of the whole thing. We call this like internally hot and smart, brands that can both be really culturally relevant and cool, but also pack a punch in terms of efficacy and proven products. So my background is actually in chemistry. So is my co-founders. I am 27, so I'm kind of a Gen Z cusper myself, but I really started kind of this journey with my thesis in college that was focused on something called chemophobia in the beauty industry, which means fear of chemicals, and how that translates to marketing in the kind of the clean and natural space, and how that affects consumer purchasing behavior. And from there, I kind of became obsessed with this problem of like, how do we make science cool for a new generation of consumers? Because that's what's actually going to get people to be interested in it, rather than kind of the way beauty operates today, which is kind of, and it's changing a little bit, but through a series of kind of just hype trend cycles and kind of misinformation spreading online. That's kind of how a lot of beauty trends start. So we're really trying to kind of change that cycle and change that paradigm by making science cool for Gen Z. So we've launched about a little over a year and a half ago, a little under a year and a half ago, April of last year. And we have 3 products on market currently. And Avant-Garde, which is our reusable sheet mask, Super Saturated, which is our viral 30% glycerin serum, and Buffer Jelly, which is kind of our answer to the slugging trend. It's a micro slugging facial oil. So all of those products follow that same 3 pillars of clinically proven, thoughtfully sustainable, ridiculously fun. And we formulate all of our products in-house. My co-founder is actually the formulator behind everything. So we have our own in-house lab, and it allows us to just make really cool, unique, experimental products. So that's the brand to date.
Amazing. That's awesome. Congrats, Lisa, on all your success so far. Keith, how about yourself? If you can share a bit about K2 financing.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Keith Kohler, and I help companies get the right financing at the right time. I focus on all the non-equity options, so the debt options are ones called non-dilutive. And the way I do that is through a structured call. I help founders identify multi-year financing strategies and help lay out for them all the different financing options, again, on the debt side that could be available to them now and into the future, depending upon their channel mix and other items are about their company, such as their structure, their credit scores. a path to profitability, if that even exists. All those different dynamics come into play. And then I help them go get those deals. And so happily, I'm supporting a lot of founders these days. And I really love what I do. So glad to be here and glad to join all of you, Sarah, Ming, and Lisa.
Amazing. Thank you, Keith. Really appreciate you being here as well. If you do have questions, by the way, for those who are listening live, please ask them in the Q&A chat, and I will certainly do my best to get to them. We really want to make this as engaging and as helpful as possible. So yes, please ask Q&A. Don't wait for a specific moment in time. Ask your questions when they come to you. So my first question, speaking of questions, my first question to all of you is, when you're building your own brands, or you're analyzing which brands you want to invest in or advise, or advising brands, how do you think about product differentiation within beauty and personal care? Maybe Sarah, we'll start you off with this one.
Yeah, awesome. So we think about differentiation, I guess, in internally at Colt, we call it USP. So the company's unique selling proposition. What is different about it, and how are they speaking to the consumer? And when we think about USP, we're really looking for companies that are doing something meaningful that's changing consumers' lives for the better in a way that didn't exist before. So we call it capital D differentiation. It's not incremental differentiation. So slightly better nutritionals or slightly better ingredients or slightly better packaging. We're talking about brands that are providing products that are materially different and materially better for consumers and solving problems for consumers that many times they didn't even know they had. I think a great example within our portfolio of a company that had, a unique selling proposition is still Supergoop. So Supergoop, provided skincare products or sun care products that acted like skincare products that were materially better than what was on the market at the time. As a result, it kind of ties back to the founder's mission, Holly's mission, which was to get consumers to wear sunscreen every single day and not just episodically when they were at the beach or, going for a fishing trip or something like that. She wanted consumers to really wear sunscreen at all times and be protected at all times. And she knew in order to fulfill that mission, she would have to formulate products that felt really good, like the best skincare products in your cabinet. And so in doing that, not only did she take market share away from existing consumers in the marketplace, but she actually grew the total addressable market and the market size for sun care. And that is really what we think that truly differentiated products do. They just don't take market share away from other players. They actually grow the size of the total addressable market.
No, I mean, that's a really great example. I appreciate that. And I'm actually a Supergoop Goop user personally. So
awesome to hear. We love a good Supergoop user.
Ming, how about you? How do you think about this question when it comes to how are you thinking about product differentiation? I know there's obviously a lot of science in your product, but how are you thinking overall about product differentiation when it comes to your brand?
Yeah, I think when it comes to a new brand, especially in the consumer category, differentiation is actually more important than probably anything else, including, in good branding, etc. Because there are so many great products to choose from now. So it really comes down to how are you different than what's already out there. And for Proven, and that came very naturally because Proven creates personalized skincare. And we're really the first to market and first to create to market for personalized skincare that is based on data. And to date, we're still the market leader. And now that we have 2 patents protecting the personalization process in all of skincare. So, for us, the differentiation came pretty organically. And it's something that we, still stand behind, even as we're entering different retail partnerships. We are. It would be much easier to let's say abandon the personalization, but that is, such a integral part of who we are and part of our differentiation that even if it causes, a little more complexity, it is still something that is going to be core to who we are. So the differentiation being a core part of the brand, I think would be the ideal way to go about it.
A quick follow-up question for you, Ming. Since your brand, obviously you're the leading personalized skincare brand out there, how do you think about personalization versus scale? Because on one hand, when I think of personalization, I think of a number of SKUs, a number of different type of products, personalized towards people. When I think about scale, I think about the exact, kind of opposite, that, you're trying to scale all these products. How do you think about this when you think about growing your brand?
That's one key reason that we are the leader in personalized skincare, because it is hard to figure out scale when it comes to personalization. And for us, how we've been able to make it work is that our brand, our entire platform is also based on data. So when there's data running through the entire, from formulations to manufacturing to figuring out, what different needs will arise in the next 2 months or the next year, and then we can make manufacturing decisions and purchase order decisions based on that data and based on predictive analytics using data. That helps us to make much smarter choices and be able to use our capital efficiently and be able to scale up efficiently. So data for us is the answer to that.
Got it. Lisa, how do you think about product differentiation when it comes to experiment overall?
Yeah, I think the way we kind of think about it is when we started the brand, we actually had quite a bit of resistance, me and my co-founder, to even starting a beauty brand, because there's a million beauty brands out there, and largely most of the products are very similar. I'm sure they're all great, but I mean, how many more hyaluronic acid serums do we really need on the market, right? So when we started the brand, the biggest focus was kind of looking at kind of the science brands that came before us. I call them science 1.0 brands, right? Like The Ordinary or the Yankee List, those kinds of brands where it's a focus more so on ingredients and collection rather than a curatorial approach to beauty products. So for us, when we think about what products Experiment would launch, it would be ones that didn't exist on the market yet. We had to be adding something genuinely new. I think Super Saturated is a really great example of that. It's the first 30% glycerin serum of its kind on the market. And it's our answer to a sea of undifferentiated hyaluronic acid products on the market, right? Kind of positioning glycerin, which is kind of an OG skincare ingredient that we know works as the gold standard for hydration, and making it cool through branding, marketing, et cetera, and an amazing formulation. So when we look at products, it has to fill this kind of white space. And moreover, and it's hard to find white space in beauty, it really is. So that's not an easy thing to do. But it's okay because we kind of take that curatorial approach. We're making one or two best versions of a single thing. So we're not going to have 5 hydrating serums. We're going to have this one. And the other piece of it is we're also looking for something that's different and experimental, not just on the product end, but also on the branding and marketing experience. So there's a lot of same in terms of visuals in beauty, a lot of brands that frankly look alike. And it's really hard not just to stand out with product, but also to stand out with brand, because it's really, really important in beauty that you have a brand that resonates and that can stand the test of time, that can kind of move fluidly with the consumer. So we also sought to create a brand that again, that we were not seeing in the market at all. Experiment has a very kind of almost unserious, wacky kind of vibe to it, with a futuristic twist. We have a lot of guidelines internally on how we do that, but kind of looking at kind of the market, we're very focused on kind of just creating stuff that doesn't exist, frankly. And that's kind of the way we look at it. Yeah.
No, that's really helpful. I also like the fact. I also appreciate how you said that how your products also tie into when you think about differentiation into the branding. Not that it's only branding, but there is but you think about differentiation in both ways, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's sought. Differentiation in both directions is really important. So yeah.
Totally. Keith, as you're advising brands on the debt side, do you come across in terms of analyzing product differentiation on your end, or not so much?
Well, it doesn't come up so much in a credit decision, except in longer cycle type of debt financing that people might be getting. So if people are getting bank loans, conventional loans or lines of credit, or they're getting SBA loans, which take longer to get, you're going to see a greater amount of underwriting. So this discussion here with everyone about product differentiation, how your product line stands out, et cetera, that becomes a bigger part of what's called an underwriting package, right? They want to get to know your business and understand how you've been successful to date and how you will be successful in the future. So it does play a role because it is the obligation of the banks and these types of institutions to really know their customer and have a good understanding of the fundamentals of their business. On the other hand, the more quick financing providers, the fintechs out there, the ones you see online, the ones that you press the button and the money shows up in your account tomorrow, they're going to care a lot less about that. They're not going to do that type of underwriting. They're going to be more focused on the financing metrics because often they're connecting to your QuickBooks or other accounting software and using algorithms, not necessarily traditional underwriting techniques, to determine if they're going to support you with financing. So I'd say, again, longer term cycle, yes. Shorter cycle, rarely.
Cool. Okay. And in terms of making your decisions when it comes to advising brands in terms of on the debt side of things, do you think about product differentiation when you start talking to brands?
Depends on what they're trying to achieve. So if they have a good sense of their specific cash requirements, what they need money for, and at what time they need it, and I direct them towards the longer term cycle, yeah, I'll spend more time getting to know them on a deeper level. If they need something very quick, they're just asking me to help them really with a transaction, not necessarily a transformation, then I might be less preoccupied with that and just helping them get exactly what they need.
Okay. No, that's helpful. That's helpful. And I appreciate you kind of spilling out the two different kind of different parts to it. On the if it's short term that they're looking for, or whether it's long term. And that helps you make your decisions. In this current market, how are you all thinking about finance? About how to finance the growth for your businesses or businesses that you might advise. Obviously, the market's tightened compared to the last couple of years. When does debt make sense? When does using cash make sense? When does it make sense, for example, to like raise a round of equity? Would love to kind of hear your thoughts on this. Maybe Sarah, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, there are so many different things that go into how and when to raise capital. Kind of on a more like general basis, when we think about whether you're raising more of a debt facility or doing a rounds of equity, we think of a debt facility as something that really funds working capital needs. So it's more of like a short term. Maybe you need to shorten the cycle between AR and AP. So you're taking out a facility to kind of facilitate that cash flow. When you think about equity financing, it's really more when you're kind of open to a strategic partner to bring on and help support the growth of the company and kind of have a voice in the strategy and kind of the go forward plan. And then B, when it's when you're looking to scale things that fall in operating expenses like team, marketing spend, and thinking about, expanding distribution channels. Maybe you're, as a beauty brand, you're direct to consumer, but you want to expand into Sephora or vice versa. And it requires a bit of more of a lift on the capital side. So that's kind of how we think about when's the right time to raise debt versus equity. And then in terms of, when's the right time, generally, I think obviously it's optimal to raise from a position of strength. So it's really when, you're exhibiting kind of revenue growth month over month, year over year. A lot of your KPIs are strong, whether that's, revenue, monthly revenue by retailer, or monthly revenue by SKU, or direct to consumer unit economics. You want to raise when all of those things are strong and really showing upward trends. And then there's always the practicality of you need to raise when you need cash. So that's really what we think about. And I guess our advice to people is when you do go out and raise, to have very specific thoughts around why you're raising and what the cash is being used for, and kind of how that rolls into a go forward plan. We say to companies when they're thinking about raising, it should be to fund an 18 to 24 month timeline. And you want to be able to show over that time period. Obviously, it takes some time to make the investments with the capital you're raising, but then you also want to show, growth from those investments before you go out and raise again. So those, I guess, would be the high notes of how we think about capital raising.
No, I appreciate that. When does it make sense to use debt? When does it make sense to use equity? Because I even see, for example, on some pitches that I see from founders, how they might use some of the equity money to for inventory to finance their inventory or their marketing, well, particularly inventory, where maybe that actually could be used better to use maybe a debt facility, although it of course it all is also dependent on the rate and as well as how that money will stay out toward. So there are certainly nuances here, but that's a great point, Sarah. How about Lisa? How are you thinking about this question relating to experiment?
Yeah, I mean, I'd honestly just echo what Sarah had said. For us, like, we've only ever taken on debt when it makes sense for inventory financing completely. And we've actually went to our investors to get that debt. And that we actually get really favorable rates that way too. So I think that's something we've done in the past. And yeah, I mean, for fundraising, absolutely. We raised our pre-seed when we were kind of pre-launch, but we had actually bootstrapped kind of a test of the brand prior so that we could go to investors with data. So we did kind of a first version of our reusable sheet mask that we had launched on our own with our own savings through social media channels. We didn't like invest in marketing or anything. It was really just like very much like the sweat equity piece of it all. And once we sold out of that inventory and we realized, cool, like we have a bigger idea for this brand. This brand we think can actually be a VC backable brand. And that was really important to qualify too. Is that like, is this a brand that we want VC money behind? I think there's sometimes among founders this like pressure to like just raise VC funding without really thinking about it. And it's something you should really think deeply about because it is very different. You do have a partner involved. So once we figured that piece out, we had kind of our metrics together and we had that case study basically of that soft launch that we did, that we bootstrapped, and then we could go and get that financing. But yeah, I mean, similarly as we're in the market now, like we think through, okay, like are our metrics really, really strong? Is the iron hot basically is what I've kind of been asking myself. And if it is, okay, it might be the right time to go out to raise.
No, that's a great points. And Ming, how do you think about this question as well? Since anything about capital allocations? Since I know you've raised some rounds of equity. How do you think about using equity versus debt, and kind of and certainly in this market?
Consumer brands cost a lot of money, as Lisa and I'm sure Sarah would and Keith would tell you. So, especially earlier on, there are usually very few debt options available to a founder earlier on, before proof points. So when you're launching, you usually have no option other than to raise equity. And it takes, typically a lot of preparations, a lot of sweat and time. But I think the way that, Lisa mentioned, which is to first get some proof points before going out to market and trying to do that at the most opportune time, all makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, to get the company started, funding is fuel, and you need a fuel to build this fire. So, regardless of how favorable your numbers are, you just have to do it. So that might just mean that you might have to do a lot more, conversations than others, but it's just a necessary step in getting everything started. So, all the checks of, do you have everything it takes? Well, you don't necessarily know until you go to market. So all you can do is go out there, spend the time, and have, the hundreds of conversations it might take to get that initial round going.
Yeah, that's a really great point, especially about how when you're very early on, you might not have access to the debt markets or debt facility. So so you might have to start with using cash, whether it's your own or whether it's equity money that you've raised externally. Keith, how do you think about this?
What I'd like to do, Mike, is expand upon some of the things that were already said, because I thought there were some really cool points that were brought up. Lisa, what I liked about what you said is about the private sources from your current equity investors providing you debt financing. For everyone out there, I'm seeing a lot more of that going on. So, and I think I would encourage all of you to have an understanding, if you have investors, whether friends and family, angel investors, or institutions, understand, could they be open to doing a one-off debt structure for you, either as a bridge round until you get to the next round of equity. That could be like a revenue-based financing type of structure. It could be a limited term promissory note, something like that. I'm finding that there's creativity coming up on helping founders, particularly because even debt capital has dried up to some degree, particularly in the fintech space. There's a huge introduction of fintech companies in the consumer space, particularly in 2018, 2019, et cetera. Probably all of you know those names because they show up in your inbox a lot, even today, but they've pulled back significantly. The traditional ABL providers, those providing money in the wholesale space against receivables and inventory, they've raised their minimums from what used to be earlier entry points to later stage entry points. Same with fintech, even ones that are helping mainly with inventory financing, particularly for brands that are growing their business principally online, they've raised their minimum. So it's resulting in a lot more creativity having to come forward, particularly from those who are already investors in the company. So again, what Ming said, yeah, all of that makes it such that for you very early stage companies out there, most of you are going to be relying on equity quite a bit longer. Hopefully, if the economy continues to improve, and that's what we all want, maybe some of those who used to occupy the earlier stage will come back and perhaps be there to help them out. I will say this, someplace you might not necessarily look, but could help all of you out there, particularly on the early stage, might be state programs, might be programs for women and minority-owned businesses, BIPOC founders. Those, if you want to Google women-owned business, California, et cetera, loan programs, that's how I'd encourage you to look. There are things out there that are not well advertised, and yet that are helping, particularly those in the early stage. Going back to what Sarah said too, I thought you summarized it perfectly, Sarah, about why you use equity and why you use debt. I kind of think of it in a kind of terse way sometimes, like debt helps you move along the curve of growth that you've already planned for yourself. Equity shifts it up and out. So for those big growth initiatives, that's what you want to be using equity for. Debt for you executing according to plan. And finally, just the importance, again, echoing what everyone said about really understanding your cash requirements thoughtfully into the future and exactly how you're going to use those proceeds. Certainly, Sarah and others in the equity space are going to give you a greater level of diligence and scrutiny about how you're doing that and how you're thinking about it. But again, even in the debt side, a little bit less, but still they're interested in learning. So just some random thoughts based on what everyone has contributed so far.
Appreciate that, Keith. And I mean, and on the topic of growth, since I know that this is part of what we're all why we had this webinar about growing beauty and personal care brands. How do you think about how do each of you think about new sales channels? And like, if you and analyzing if you should, for example, head into a new retailer and introduce a new distribution channel into your business. Maybe Ming, we can start this off with you.
Yes, absolutely. Proven had recently entered Sephora, which is very exciting for us. That took some time, almost a year of discussions between the parties, lots of planning on both of our teams, and evaluation of what the right partner would be throughout this journey. And I think in terms of determining a new channel, right, it doesn't have to be a new retail channel. It could just be entering international, or it could be adding a channel mix in your marketing mix. Regardless, I think it's helpful to have a test and learn approach. And this is even something that we're doing with our new retail partner, whereby, instead of entering, let's say, all the doors, or, putting a big portion of spend against a new marketing channel, what is a way to put a small amount of spend behind something, test and learn for, 3 months, 6 months to understand, is it the right fit? Because I think, it's all is easy when, you hear examples of other brands that have, exploded on this, new channel or new partner or new country or whatnot. But a lot of that might not apply to your company. So you really have to see what fits. And you might not, know until you try. This is another thing, right? It's like, even if you have very similar customers as another company, you really never know if it's a good fit for your own customers until you try something out. This is something that we're continuously learning about our, for ourselves too, right? Do we launch a new product? Do we use this copy versus another? Do we have this sustainability initiative versus another? Or this, we almost always go back to our customer base, do survey work, do discussion work before we make any big leaps, because we really learned the hard way that what we think we know about ourselves, about our company, about our customers might not be actually what is reality.
No, that's a great, those are great points. Great points, because you have to balance as well, that growth or what that growth could be in the retailer, with also, what profitability is as well too, or if that retail channel will be a profitable channel in the future, and you don't know that unless you actually try and you actually experience it.
I think especially for companies where we're talking about trying to be very prudent about our spending, about the market being the way that it is, right? If we were in this, let's say the market of 3 years ago, and we all knew that we had, endless fundraising backing, then maybe the answer is different, right? You can throw money at everything, but now this is not a time to do that. And I think most people are not trying to build companies where, we just, throw money at things. So this is a time to be prudent, and the best way to do that is to test small and learn.
So how do you think about this question, Lisa? When it comes to testing small, learning, versus or heading to a new retail or sales channel?
Yeah, I think the story of experiment has almost been like a very conservative approach to that, honestly, both on where we decide to sell, but also kind of what Ming had mentioned, kind of the marketing mix too, of entering a new social media channel. Should you be on TikTok Shop? All of these things, there's so many things that get thrown at you. In live shopping and all of these different things that everyone's like, you should be on this, and I'm like, but should we? And it all sounds like a great idea, but at the end of the day, bandwidth is one of our biggest considerations at this stage of the business, because I feel really, really strongly, if we're going to be in a new channel, we should be doing it right. That doesn't mean you can't test. That doesn't mean you can't exist on that platform and learn. I think Threads was a good moment for brands to kind of mess around and find out, right? In terms of how Threads, we ran a test sale on Threads, and I was literally on Threads for 48 hours, tweeting out nonsense most of the time from the brand account, but it was funny, and it was a fun, engaging moment for our customers. But I think bandwidth is the biggest consideration. We are majority D2C, and we are on Urban Outfitters, but each and every distribution channel you enter is another thing you have to manage. And our goal is to manage it well, right? So we want to do that well. D2C wise, I mean, we actually don't do paid marketing. We've been really fortunate to be able to kind of grow organically. And that is majority through Instagram and TikTok as two channels, our main channels. We don't really stray outside of those. Just pretty much all D2C. So, that works early on for sure. And right now we have like 2 full-time employees, me and my co-founder, and then kind of an army of other people helping us. But at the end of the day, like the bandwidth is the tightest piece of that. And for our brand not to be diluted or stretched too thin, you want to be just really careful about where you kind of place the brand. I've seen a lot of my friends, honestly, who kind of stretch themselves too thin, trying to get distribution everywhere because everyone is like, distribution is the number one thing you should be considering, but you should consider that at the right time. And that's usually when you have either the right amount of money, bandwidth, the right partner. There's a lot of things to consider, but I would just urge most consumer brands, and again, every brand will have a different kind of experience, to be a bit more conservative and thoughtful about their approach to like social media or like a selling channel, like live shopping. Like if you want to see real results from it, you're gonna have to put in legwork. And if you don't have the bandwidth to put in that legwork well, you're not gonna get like good information out of it. So that's kind of the approach that we take.
No, I appreciate that, Lisa. That makes a ton of sense. How about you, Sarah? How are you thinking about this question when it comes to distribution and new distribution channels, especially in this age where it seems like a lot of what's being preached is prioritize profitability over growth? How do you think about these kind of conflicting things?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about expanding distribution with our partner companies, it's really important to think through, why are we expanding distribution? Is it because we want to reach more of the same customer that we already have? Is it that we are trying to expand to a different type of customer? Is it because we want to drive brand awareness? And that drives a lot of the decision making that falls out from thinking about a retail partner and how to support a new retail partner. So answering the why is really important. I think in the case where, you're trying to really expand distribution and, let's take, we're talking about the beauty space. So, in terms of retailers that drive the biggest volume, it's Sephora and Ulta. Those are the two, physical brick and mortar retailers. They also have a .com presence that drive the most volume in the beauty space. I think when thinking through something like that, you want a real partner. So in the same way, when we talk about taking on an equity partner, you want to have a strong partnership, someone who's aligned around what the brand vision and the brand principles are, and someone who shares your vision for growth and understands your vision for growth. So that, I think that's another important thing to think through when talking to potential retailers that you may want to expand to. And then, I think in terms of what does it actually take to succeed in retail, there's the question of capital. So what is the initial PO going to be? What does that look like? How quickly does the retailer want to expand you? How quickly do you want to expand? We've seen a lot of success in the start smaller and kind of grow gradually over time. I think that's how most of our brands have grown most organically in a place like Sephora. And then you have to think through the tactical pieces of how are you going to support this retailer? I think especially, again, we're partnering with brands when they're 2 to 10 million of revenue. They don't have the brand awareness that some of the much larger brands have. So it's really about generating demand within these retailers rather than having that demand pull from the brand awareness. So you really need to kind of have the basics set in terms of a team to really push sales within those retailers, sales support inside the stores, a really robust sampling program. Does the packaging work in retail? Does it draw the consumer's eye toward it? So really thinking about all the different facets of the retail experience and having the right levers in place to drive sales in a meaningful way.
No, that makes a ton of sense. If you get an offer to go into a retail channel or you're able to, you have to understand and kind of assess if you actually have the bandwidth that you actually can invest in that to make it successful,
Exactly.
or to give it a fair shot to be successful.
Right. The worst is you try and fail.
Yeah.
The best is you're not ready and you wait, to your point, Lisa, and kind of roll out slowly over time.
Yeah, one other thing that you had mentioned about like demand and brand awareness, like that's another dimension of it. Like one of the philosophies I have with like marketing, especially, and just, consumer demand is like, I almost like to wait sometimes till our consumer is like deeply asking for it, like constantly, like you can't get away from it. I think a good example of that is like community. So like, you'll get pitched a lot, especially as a consumer brand founder, like, use this community platform or this one. And there's a lot of loyalty programs that are kind of launching, and it's always like, how do you assess those? But for us, like, we don't want to create like an offline or off Instagram, off TikTok community unless there's a real desire for it. There's a demand, right? Like people are going to come themselves. And that's the same with kind of how we think about retail too. Like, do we have enough eyeballs or brand awareness to kind of make it easier to drive sales in that retailer, in that particular location? Because if we don't, it's going to be a lot more legwork to get the job done. So we always just kind of look at it through that like demand lens through like marketing and distribution.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Keith, what are your thoughts on this?
I'll just add a quick comment or two. One thing, I've been blessed to speak to hundreds and hundreds of founders over the years. And one thing I'm observing in this area is pre-pandemic, the marketing budgets as a percentage of revenue were quite significant. And I saw a lot more boldness in, dare I say, throwing it out there and kind of seeing what happens. Now, post-pandemic and during pandemic, marketing as a percentage of revenue, a lot smaller. We know that founders face uphill challenges on even just understanding the effectiveness of the dollars they put out there, right? Particularly in the online space with the changes in Facebook and other algorithms, which it was a terrific channel in the beginning, and then it seemed to just get harder and harder to even measure effectiveness or even find a way to get it. So I find this challenge, believe it or not, or the marketing challenge for founders as or even sometimes more difficult than the financing challenge because of such amazing fragmentation. Lisa, you said it, right? All these options keep showing up, and where do you choose to deploy your dollars? And Sarah, I think what you said is important too, and all of you have echoed this, is the importance of, I'm seeing all of the founders I talk to go in very small bites, not going crazy, trying hard to just get some level of effectiveness or measured results so that they don't blow the bank. And the other consideration of that too is the huge shift in the management to profitability, led by the venture capital companies and private equity firms and other equity providers who, again, have not been as available generally. So founders are like, well, I have no choice to go this route to manage to profitability. So that consideration also meant that of all the places that had to be scrutinized the most, marketing and all your staffing and costs of W-2 1099 and consultants and advisors. So
got it. Yeah, appreciate you talking about that market shift. It's been quite the shift over the past few years. We've been having a few questions here, so want to get to the audience questions. What KPIs are most important to focus on when evaluating taking on equity? I'm not sure I quite understand that.
I can take a stab at that.
All right, go for it.
I feel like the key KPI in deciding whether you should take equity versus debt or maybe the question is more VC funded versus more bootstrapped. I think it really depends on you. What kind of business are you trying to build? And is this a business you're trying to build, let's say, for the next 20 years of your life? What time frame are you building on? And coming out of YC, I think there's a little bit of a a little bit of in Silicon Valley, there's a little bit of a prejudice against slower build, bootstrap. But now that I personally don't live in Silicon Valley anymore, but I'm in the midst of just normal businesses among normal people. I think it's actually a beautiful way of building a business, to build it slowly, to build it the way you've always wanted to be, rather than have people that maybe know better, but they'll certainly tell you they know better, to build it the way that they think the business should be built. I personally am building a venture-backed company, but I really think that a lot of the recent, I think, prejudice against building a bootstrap, slower, what is negatively called a lifestyle business, even though building no business is really a lifestyle choice, is uncalled for. So I think it would be good for a founder to think for themselves and say, what am I better suited for? And maybe you are well suited for a fast, breaking things kind of venture-backed business. But I think asking yourself those questions and what it is that you're wanting out of this journey is really the only real KPI.
I can't echo that honestly enough. I am so glad that we had the opportunity to bootstrap it initially, because we had no intention of raising venture. The only reason we chose that is because we saw a really strong signal in the noise, but B, we realized, we just want to make a skincare brand too. We had a much bigger vision for the brand itself that required venture capital for us to get there in a time frame that we wanted, right? Could we have built that brand over 10 years, 15 years? Absolutely. But we felt like the time is now to kind of create the future science brand for a new consumer. And we need venture capital money to do that in the time frame that we want to achieve that we think it's important to achieve it in. So that is it really is about you, what you want to build. And there really is no issue whatsoever with bootstrapping that until either you change your mind and there is a strong reason to raise venture, or you don't and you build an awesome business that you own 100% of. Isn't that nice? So I think that I totally agree. There used to be this kind of weird negative view of lifestyle businesses, but frankly I have a lot of friends who are very happy building that. And I'm I love our investors. I'm glad we raised venture, but there are some days where you're just oh, that seems kind of nice. So it really is about you.
That's really well said. Really well said. That really just depends what you want. There's a brilliant book I enjoy, and again, maybe it simplifies this a little bit, but it just, in terms of who you are, it's Rich versus King. And it's a bit about king meaning do you want to own the business, Rich, do you want to make it into a huge business where you own a small portion of it, but it is a big business. But that, I feel like that's a pretty great book just to kind of see where you kind of lie on that kind of spectrum. I do think that's pretty helpful. Sarah and Keith, I don't know if either of you also have thoughts on this topic as well.
No, I don't think that. I mean, when you again are taking on equity, you're taking on a partner, so there is another voice in the room. So I think that's important to remember, is that you're taking on a lifelong partner, that we stick around if we're not going anywhere. And I think that in order, I don't know exactly where the KPI part of the question was coming from, but I guess it gives a flavor of what we look for when we're looking at different companies. We're looking for revenue momentum across the brand, 70% plus revenue momentum year over year. And we want that momentum to sustain, going forward, industry standard gross margin profile, the beginnings of an A+ team that you're, ready to and willing to build out a strong senior executive bench that has industry experience, and looking for a really strong growth plan that's been well thought out. And they're going back to the point about proof points. There have been proof points historically that kind of tie to how you're going to achieve that future growth. So those are really like the key areas that we focus on when we're considering making an investment in a company. And of course, the founder and alignment with the founder and an understanding and alignment around the vision is the most critical thing.
Totally. Keith, if you have
I'll just add the quick comment to everything. Capital efficiency comes up a lot now, more than ever. It's a phrase probably we weren't even discussing a few years ago, but certainly in the venture community, we're hearing it more and more about making sure that every dollar that's given to them is spent wisely. Pre-pandemic, again, we saw a lot, just dollars were put out in the marketplace, not knowing necessarily if they were going to get a result or not, but focus on capital efficiency. And I really appreciate what Ming and Lisa contributed about these larger mindset issues. Really, what is it you want for yourself in your business beyond the financial metrics that others might be focused on? So I really appreciate them bringing that to this forum.
Totally. I have, if you're able to spare a few more minutes, I have one more question here that I thought was interesting. I think this is probably more directed towards the founders, Ming and Lisa. But do you see a gap in equipment capability, infrastructure, co-manufacturers' ability to produce new innovative products? Has that been ever an issue on the manufacturing side?
I mean, on our end, we formulate in-house for a reason. And it's not just because my co-founder and I have chemistry backgrounds, like that's cool, but there are plenty of founders I know who have chemistry backgrounds that don't necessarily formulate in-house, but you'll often find is that they do, because and my co-founder, by the way, like used to work at kind of a manufacturer, kind of as a formulation chemist, making products in an R&D house, like making products based on briefs from other brands. And what we've just found over time is that the way products are made is typically through a marketing brief that is given to a chemist who doesn't really have kind of a say in what that product ultimately becomes, because they're hired to make it. But also there are kind of these unspoken rules in R&D houses around what they think brands want, because that's kind of the typical pattern, right, that they see. So they might formulate to a specific ingredient standard regardless of what the request was, or they might formulate in just certain ways in styles, just like, any kind of profession might have like a different type of like style, like a cook, right? Might cook different things. Like chemists also have some kind of flavors like that. But we formulate in-house so that we're able to kind of get really, I guess, nitty gritty in terms of like how we create products and create something really different. It gives us a lot more visibility on the process. We can manage our margins a lot better, actually, because a lot of R&D houses might not give you certain information about the product until you kind of go through with the project. So you just have way more visibility when you formulate in-house, and you can actually create stuff that's really different. I think one of the things that we think about is like with our 30% glycerin serum, kind of the unspoken rule in cosmetic chemistry is don't use glycerin above 10% because it gets really sticky and consumers don't want that. So it's like this notion they're making a couple of leaps of assumptions in the choices that they make around what consumers want. And so we found that we actually can get better, more interesting products if we formulate in-house. And obviously, like, I wouldn't suggest that for everyone, frankly. Like, the reason we can do that is because my co-founder has like nearly a decade of formulation experience in the cosmetic industry, not because of anything else. So, I think that's why we have kind of vertically integrated in that one area, so that we can, create more unique and different products, and then we tech transfer them out to our manufacturer.
No, that's really interesting. Ming, if you have any thoughts too.
So Proven also formulates our products in-house. One of our team members was the head of dermatology at Stanford University. Another one is molecular chemist and cosmetic formulator, also from Stanford. So when we were making our products, it was the initial batch took many months of formulation together. But from there, the scale up from formulation to a scaled manufacturing, that actually took a lot of thinking on our own part in terms of how we could scale that up with formulation labs. So to their question, it might take tweaking, but you probably should do most of the thinking in terms of how best to tweak your system so that you can get the scale, so that you can get the pricing advantages, so that you can get, the ability to build a real business with a partner. Obviously innovation is important, and as we all talked about, differentiation is important, which means that what you're bringing to market will have different elements that might not fit into the one of the modular pieces, but it's really on you to make sure that you can make it fit in some ways, because there are advantages to being able to take advantage, to being able to work with some of the partners that are out there who have the FDA registrations and the good manufacturings that are already out there. I don't think you want to be inventing everything in the chain starting out.
No, that's a great point. Great point. Excellent point. Well, all of you, I know that we're over time, but thank you all so much for joining us today and being our panelists.
Thank you.
Somebody had a very urgent question about hiring the C-suite. I'll just say in 2 seconds. So I hired my C-suite mostly actually from my network. Had a lot of just random lunches with people that are in the industry. Wasn't really trying to poach them or anything, but some of them actually became our early team members and now C-suite members. So I think especially earlier stage, it is better if you can stick to your network. If you don't have a big network in that industry, try to expand it, try to meet more people. I think that, that would be the easier way to get started with hiring the C-suite.
Yeah, that's a great point. Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments on hiring? Well, thank you all so much for joining me here today. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye.